Start out by saying Barak Yahweh, Ba'Hashem Yahushai, Ba'Hashem Rachah Kodash. Welcome to another live lesson. The name of this one is basically just various topics, dated May 29th, 2024, the hopeful year of Jacob's trouble. And I literally have nothing, to talk about right now. Just gonna go in the spirit. Whatever the spirit feeds me, I'll feed you. We've been going back and forth with these scoffers and with the likes of Vocab Malone and getting on the IUIC, Bishop Nathaniel, and Hell Doctrine and all this stuff. And, one thing that is good about it is that, it ups your spiritual game, because now that these wacky-tacky Christians keep, coming at us with, well, Deuteronomy 28:68 don't mean this, it don't mean that. It causes us to even go further and deeper or further in depth, into looking into more and more history and more information on that particular topic, that indeed it is factual, that Deuteronomy 28:68 is talking about the transatlantic slave trade. Because when you do when you do research, you come to find out that one of the main, the brother, the elder Yahukanan from I was watching this video yesterday. I did a quick video. I called it Nibble on That Vocab. And the brother was going to the different trade routes, of Rome. And the different trade routes of Rome, one of them was the King's Highway, which the King's Highway, I believe the King's Highway was something that Jake used a lot. They used the other one also, but they used that one a lot because that, is mentioned in the scriptures more so, if I'm not mistaken, because when Moses and Israel, going through the actually when the children of Israel, I'll say it that way, going through the land of Edom when they were in the wilderness, they asked Esau if they could go through, and they wouldn't allow them. I believe it was mentioned something about the King's Highway, that they would go through there, and that was one of the major routes, for travel, for trade, and so on and so forth. But there was another one called the Via Maris, which was the view or the way of the sea. Via Maris, right, way of the sea. And it was pretty much right on the coastline of, of Israel, and it would go all the way down into Egypt, and that was pretty heavy, the Spirit led the brother to that information. Now earlier I was watching this video. I just typed in I'm not on YouTube. I typed in on the Google. I typed in slavery in ancient Rome or something like that, and I was watching this video. It did pop up on YouTube, and pretty much they were going into how slavery was in ancient Rome, and pretty much mirrored what goes on here what went on here in America. They had a manumittis, I think it was called, or something like that, which is pretty much the same as the Emancipation Proclamation. They had, slaves had no status, as they didn't here. You became 3/5 of a man. That's why your voice didn't count, your opinion didn't count. They had, if they would run away, they would get branded. They were stamped, or sometimes were even killed, depending on the severity. So there was a lot of things from the ancient Roman Empire that Esau adopted here in America. Now, there were criminals that were made slaves, and that's pretty much what America did. When they emancipated the slaves, you had the 13th Amendment, which pretty much states that neither slavery nor involuntary servitude shall exist in the United States except for crimes, and the rest. You have to go. I don't remember every word, but it's something along those lines, and that was the same thing that was going on in Rome. Criminals were made into slaves, and that's why Esau put that provision in the 13th Amendment so that way, and that was the loophole that they used to keep Jake in slavery, as you see. And what they did was, this is how they built up slavery again in the South, through something known as the chain gangs. They would trump up a charge against Jake, and then use that as an excuse to put him on a chain gang to work pretty much for free, room and board, as they were doing as when they were slaves. And that was a loophole that these devils did. There's a documentary on Netflix called The 13th, I believe it's called, and it goes into that history of how they used that to pretty much enslave Jake. And like I said, the ancient Roman Empire, in many ways, not just politically and religiously, and the way that they did certain things mimic America, but also in many other fashions, monetarily, the way they handle slaves, so on and so forth. But like the brother was bringing out, the Via Maris, that was where they would bring, that was a trade route from Jerusalem all the way down into Egypt. And they were going caravans. There was another brother that was doing a lesson on the caravans. I forget who it was, and I remember Apostle Gabar did something on the Ethiopian eunuch that came in a chariot, and that was heavy because that shows you that you had Israelites coming from Alexandria, you had Israelites coming from Cyrene. When you go down into the northern parts of Africa, they were coming to Jerusalem, once a year to worship, the Passover, the Feast of First Fruits, and the Feast of Tabernacles, and they would come in a big company, and they would use those same routes to come back and forth, or go back and forth to Jerusalem and back home to where they were from. When we go to Acts, the 2nd chapter, now you've heard of Simon the Cyrenian, the individual, the Jake that helped Yahushua carry his cross. Well, he was Simon of Cyrene, which Cyrene is in northern Africa, and that's where he was coming from, because you had a large community of Israelites from that region. You have here in the book of Acts, the 2nd chapter, in the 5th verse, it says, "And there were dwelling at Jerusalem Jews, devout men out of every nation under heaven." Why were they were Jews, they were Israelites. And why were they there from every nation under heaven? Because they were coming from different parts of the world. Some of them were coming from East India, from those regions, Pakistan, all those different regions there, Iran, and those regions, coming down to Jerusalem. You had those that were coming from Asia Minor, Turkey. You had those that were coming from Greece. You had those that were coming from Italy. You had them coming from all different places. And then you had a lot of Israelites that were coming up from the interiors of Africa, because you had large communities of Israelites there. You had something known as the Libertines, which the Libertines were freed Israelites that were freed by Pompey. I believe it was Pompey that freed them. That's what they were called, the Libertines, because they were slaves at one time and they were freed by Pompey. That's what they were called, the Libertines. The Lord's will, we'll get that next. So when we read down to the 9th verse, it says Parthians and Medes and Elamites. So all those regions are what you would call, what they call the cradle of civilization, where the scriptures call the plains of Shinar or Mesopotamia. That region there, you had a lot of Israelites that would come from that region and come down into Jerusalem to keep the feast. Now, when you read the book of Tobit, Tobit was in Nineveh. He was stationed in Nineveh, because he was one of the ones that was transported there, when, Shalmaneser the 5th brought Israelites there, and then other Assyrian kings brought Israelites there after that. So you had a lot of Israelites in that region, and Tobit was there. And Tobit actually, in his old age, before he died, he actually witnessed the destruction of Nineveh that the Lord told Jonah was going to happen. Now Jonah prophesied that Nineveh was going to fall in 40 days, and it didn't. And that did not make him a false prophet. It just meant that eventually it would fall, and it did. And Tobit said, "Look, I believe the words of Jonah. So you got to get up out of here." He told his son Tobias that, and he actually lived to see the fall of ancient Nineveh. So it says Parthians and Medes and Elamites. So these were Israelites that were in those regions that were calling themselves, this was their citizenship at the time. Just like you had Roman citizens, which were Israelites. Just like you had Greek citizens that were Israelites. Just like you had Alexandrian citizens that were Israelites. You had Cyrenian and so on and so forth citizens that were Israelites that were living in those lands. Now some of them knew they were Israelites, some of them didn't. And the brothers, big up to the brothers out there in Des Moines, Iowa, the Des Moines, Iowa camp. We did a lesson yesterday, for the Tuesday live show, and Apostle Gabar threw out I believe it was Apostle Gabar or Bishop Sakaran threw out a title, about the history and the history or something like that, and the brothers jumped on it. So beautiful. It says dwellers in Mesopotamia and in Judea and Cappadocia and Pontus and Asia. Right, that's going up into the land of Turkey. So you had Israelites everywhere. Phrygia and Pamphylia in Egypt. Yeah, because you had the Alexandrian Jews in Egypt. It says, and in the parts of Libya, which is in northern Africa, and about Cyrene. See? So if you were to take out a map and look up, Libya and Cyrene, you look at a map and you'll see that it was in the northern parts of Africa. And you had a large community of Israelites there. And they would come to Jerusalem around this time. They would come to Jerusalem to keep the Feast of the Passover, the Feast of First Fruits, and the Feast of Tabernacles. All right? That's why I said there were Jews, devout men out of every nation under heaven. Because you had Israelites that knew that they were Israelites scattered abroad everywhere. Then you had Israelites that didn't know that they were Israelites that were scattered abroad everywhere. And those Israelites that didn't know, they would be classified as Helene, because they were embracing the religion of the Greeks, the customs of the Greeks, And that's why the Apostle Paul came back and said there's no difference between the Jew and the Greek. Why? Because they were both Israelites. It's just that one of them spoke, Hebrew, and the other one spoke Greek. Now, the ones that spoke Greek, you had the Hellenistas, which spoke Greek, but kept the customs of Israel. But then you had those that spoke Greek and didn't keep the custom of Israel, which were also Israelites. Those are the ones that totally lost their way during the time of the Hellenization that took place during about roughly 200 years prior to Yahushua, and the ministry that he brought out, the gospel. So it was roughly around 200 years that had taken place. So for those 200 years or so, you had generation after generation being brought up in the Hellenistic ways, speaking the Greek language, eating the Greek foods, following the Greek customs, worshiping the Greek gods. Because at that time, when Antiochus Epiphanes was alive, it was not lawful for the Israelites back then to call themselves Jews or to keep the Sabbath or to circumcise their children at the penalty of death. So this is why you had in the New Testament the Gentiles that salvation was open to, which were those Israelite foreigners that fell away following behind the customs, of their forefathers before them that embraced the religion of the Greeks. See, and this is a major portion of the history that's missing from the scriptures, which is contained in the Apocrypha. And that's why they took the Apocrypha out. Because if you had the Apocrypha and you knew the history, you would be able to break down the mystery if you were part of the elect. And when you go into that history of the Hellenization of the Jews back then, during the time of Antiochus Epiphanes, and you read the New Testament, it starts to make a lot more sense. than just all people being able to be saved. And then you'd be like, that's why it says there's no difference between the Jew and the Greek. It didn't say there was no difference between a Jew and every people, all people on the planet. No, why did it specify Jew and the Greek? Because there was a great falling away that happened during the Greek Empire, where Jake lost their way and were not able to call themselves Israelites. So they had to call themselves by the names of the Greeks. They could not circumcise themselves. If they wanted to partake in the gladiatorial events or any type of those games, they would have to be butt naked. So if they have to be butt naked, that means that they would have to be circumcised. So they had something called epispasm, which is a procedure where you sew the foreskin back onto your rod, so that when you took your clothes off and you partook in those games, whether it was discus or wrestling or whatever, boxing or whatever, they saw that your penis was uncircumcised. You see? So there was a lot that went on. So Timothy's father, who was an Israelite, was a man whose family sold out back, during the time of the Hellenization. And Eunice, I believe it was his mother, because you had Lois, I think that was her grandmother, and Eunice, which was Timothy's mother, she was a devout Israelite. Devout Israelite women do not marry men of the other nations. So if she was devout, when the Apostle Paul praised both of them for their devotion and for their piousness, if that's even a word, and devotion to the Father. So if she is a devout Israelite, she is not going to marry a heathen man, because she knows that's against the law. So when she married Timothy's father, she was in love with him, even though he had a different religion than she did. You see? So when you start putting that stuff together, reasoning like that, you start to put the pieces together through the spirit and power of Yahweh B'Shem Yahushai. That Timothy's father was an Israelite, Timothy himself was an Israelite, and then so on and so forth. Titus and all those different individuals were Israelites that had got caught up in that net of Hellenization. Okay? So it says, and strangers of Rome, because you had a lot of Israelites in Rome, which were strangers. They were not, necessarily born in those lands, but they migrated to those lands from Israel. It says Jews and proselytes. Now, the word proselytes is a word for converts. Now, what does it mean here by converts? It's not talking about someone who converted to the religion of the Jews, so to speak. It's talking about someone who converted from following behind the Sanhedrin, following behind the Pharisees, the Sadducees, the scribes, the lawyers, their customs and traditions, to following Yahweh Shai. That was the proselytization. They converted from following those religions of the leaders of the time of Israel to following Yahweh Shai. That's what it meant by the proselytes. Cretes and Arabians. You had men from the island of Crete, which you had a lot of Cretes on the island of Crete, but you also had converts there and Israelites there in that land. And they weren't necessarily calling themselves Israelites in certain cases. And Arabians, because you had, and I was going to say that through the Spirit earlier, but I didn't, but here it is. You had, in the land of Arabia, you had a lot of Israelites in those lands, because even when you had the prevalent religion of Islam that took over around 600 AD and above, you had a lot of Israelites, which are known as the Moors, that embraced the religion of Islam. Now, from time to time, you hear Elder Pastor mention it, you hear us mention it. A movie that they put us on 2 years ago called El Cid, with the greatest, lousiest actor of all times, Charlton Heston. And he played Rodrigo de Bivar, which was a Christian, and then you had the individuals that played Muslims. But those Muslims had made a league with the Christians, and some of them were devout to each other. It was like a unspoken brotherhood between them, even though they both had different religions. And they saw the the integrity and the faith and the mercy of Rodrigo de Bivar, and they surnamed him El Cid, or the Lord, I believe it's called, you know. And you had that dynamic. So you had a lot of Israelites that were in the land of Arabia during the time of our Lord that were coming to Israel. So what do you think that they did eventually, the ones that didn't know that they were Israelites, or the ones that stayed there and then the whole conquering of Islam came through? A lot of them embraced the religion of Islam. So you got a lot of Arabs out there that look like Arabs that are really Israelites, that just happened to embrace the religion of Islam when it came sweeping through, Europe and the so-called Middle East, Asia and all that, back during the time of the Mohammedan rule. When they conquered those lands, which that whole religion of Islam was created by the Roman Catholic Church, from the very inception, because the wife that Muhammad married, she was a devout Roman Catholic. Her cousin Waraka ibn Nafal, which he actually groomed, Muhammad, because Muhammad was illiterate. He was a devout Roman Catholic, and what it was set up to find the individual that they could set up and establish, so that the Arab people could go and they could go and fight for the land of Jerusalem, take that land and give it back to the popes. That was their hope, But what happened was, once the Muslims won the stronghold of Jerusalem, they really bought that Allah thing, that whole Islam religion, and they said, look, Allah is with us, and they refused to give the land to Jerusalem, so it backfired on them. All right, so there's a lot of history, man, out there. So you had a lot of Israelites in the land of Arabia also. It says, we do hear them speak in our tongues the wonderful works of the Most High. Now let's go over to the 6th chapter, right? And let's read the 6th chapter in the 1st verse. It says, and in those days when the number of the disciples was multiplied, there arose a murmuring of the Grecians against the Hebrews. Now, this is why it's important to go over Hebrew and Greek words. Face value, if you read this, you're thinking it's talking about so-called white people that call themselves Greeks. But when you go into the Greek, the word for Grecians there is, in the New Testament, is Hellenistas. Hellenistas are Greek-speaking Jews that kept their laws, statutes, commandments, of being an Israelite, but they just happened to be speaking Greek because they were born in those lands, and adopted the language of the Greeks. Now the Apostle Paul spoke Greek, but he was brought up as a Jew. He was brought up as an Israelite because he was an Israelite, so he spoke Hebrew and Greek because he had Roman citizenship. Because Tarshish, which was the city where he was born in, which is in Turkey today, modern day Turkey, that was a province of Rome. So when he was born in a Roman province, which gave him Roman citizenship. So he had clout. Plus, he was a learned man. So he learned the Hebrew language. He learned the Greek language. He learned, the customs, traditions, the law, statutes, commandments of Yahweh B'Shem Yahushai. He also learned about the gladiatorial games. He also learned about a lot of the Greek history and a lot of the Greek fables, a lot of the Greek myths, so on and so forth. Therefore, he was more capable and equipped to deal with the Israelite foreigners than Peter was, even though Peter was the head. Because Peter was the head to go and teach the circumcision, the one that knew that they were Jews. The Apostle Paul was set up to be the teacher of the Israelite foreigners, even though he wanted to teach the Jews. He didn't really want to go to the Israelite foreigners. He really wanted to go to the Jews, because he figured since he knew the laws backward and forward, he would be able to convince them and break it down to them and show them, look, this, that, and the other. And, when you go back here, and remember when Joshua said this, and remember when Moses said that, and this, that, and the other. Well, this was all speaking about the Messiah. His name is Yahushua. But it backfired because the Lord didn't want him to do that. The Lord wanted him to teach the Israelite foreigners because he was better equipped. So when you look up this word Grecians, you can look it up in the Greek, in the New Testament. You could look it up if you have your Zondervan's Bible Dictionary, or you could even type it on Google, you know, Grecians in the book of Acts 6, or who were the Grecians. They should tell you that they were Greek-speaking Jews, you know. So it says, again, there was a murmuring of the Grecians against the Hebrews because their widows were neglected in a daily ministration. And this is why the disciples, which were apostles at this time, Peter and them, had to set up, you know, because they had a table. At that table, you will have the widows of the Hebrew women and the widows of the Greek, you know, Grecian women. They were coming up to the table to receive, you know, donations and, you know, clothing and food and things of that nature to help, because if their husbands had died. So the ones handling the business, which happened to be the Hebrew-speaking Israelites, they were neglecting them. They were showing more favor to the Hebrew-speaking ones, you know, than they were to them. So the murmuring came up. Apostle Peter caught wind of it, so he had to go and set up an order of certain men, reputable men, that were righteous men, that had a good report among the people, you know, and that were honest, trustworthy, and he set them up over the tables to officiate the business for the Grecian women, widows, because they were being neglected. So he set up 7 men, Stephen being one of them, and in the midst of doing that, he eventually came across, you know, the libertines. He came across the Alexandrian Jews, so on and so forth, which we're going to read. And this is where he gave that oration in the book of Acts, the 7th chapter, of the history, going all the way back to Moses. You know, going back to Abraham, then to Moses, so on and so forth, just to explain to them about Yahushua and the Messiah and him coming and the reason why he was teaching, and they were teaching the gospel of Yahushua. And then what happened? The Grecians, you know, that were known as the libertines, and them, they got mad, and Jake just tore him apart. They killed him, you know, because after he saw all that, he was in the spirit, man. He was such in the spirit that he actually saw the heavens opened up. He saw the Most High sitting on his throne. He saw Yahushua sitting on his right hand, and he said that to these people from what he actually saw, and they were so angry and incensed against him that they stoned him. But he didn't feel none, because he was in like a super euphoric state, to where he didn't feel nothing. You know, he pretty much was ready to go. You know, and then after they stoned him, he died, and he went right to the spirit world. You know, that was the last thing he said. I see the Most High, you know, and when he saw that, he see the Most High and the Son of Man sitting on his right hand, oh, they just lost it there. So when we jump down to the 8th verse in Acts 6, and Stephen, full of faith and power, did great wonders and miracles among the people. Then there arose certain of the synagogue, which is called the synagogue of the Libertines, and Cyrenians and Alexandrians. Right? So these are, you know, Israelites that knew that they were Jews, that spoke Greek, that were coming from northern Africa. And of them of Cilicia and of Asia. So these were Israelites that came from these different parts, that knew that they were Israelites, disputing with Stephen. See, because they were speaking against, you know, his teachings, you know, against the gospel of Yahushua, and they were not able to resist the wisdom and the spirit by which he spake. And that's bad, man. And what did they do? Eventually they put him to death, and that's what these devils do. You see, like devils like vocab, you know, they come against the truth. They can't debunk the truth, so to speak. So what they do is they resort to slander. They resort to, you know, going to some vague individual out there that happened to maybe watch a video or two, or might have had an interaction with a Hebrew Israelite, and he commits a crime. All of a sudden the Israelites are guilty. Yet he's not talking about that pastor, that ex-pastor that just got caught in the back seat with a 16-year-old boy blowing his rod. He don't talk about stuff like that. He don't talk about the horrific, murders that these so-called Christians do. But any little thing that he can find against Israel, he'll bring it out and try to make us look bad. That's the accuser of our brethren, that devil, vocab. And he's weak sauce, but he's a serpent, so he's able to manipulate certain words and say certain things, and the average Jake that's not learned, they're like, oh, well, that makes sense, because they're simple. Oh, that makes sense, and they fall right for the trap of the devil. Right in the devil's snare. God damn. All right, so with that being said, it says, so they couldn't resist it. So it said then they suborned men. When you suborn somebody, meaning you pay somebody off to be a false witness, they suborned men which said, we have heard him speak blasphemous words against Moses and against the Most High. So here comes the false slanders. They did the same thing to Yahushua. They did the same thing to the apostles. They did the same thing to all of the apostles, because they couldn't resist the truth. Therefore, they had to resort to underhand tactics. And those underhand tactics were to hire, look it up, suborn. They hired, false witnesses to witness against them. Matter of fact, I have a study Bible here. Let me see something. That was 6 and 11. Acts chapter 6 and verse 11. And we're going to look up the word suborned. Suborned, the word is hupabalo. To throw in stealthily, that is introduce by collusion. This one don't go into it too much, but others they pretty much they hired false witnesses to witness against them. All right, and guess what? They lost, because Yahushua said, I will give you a mouth with wisdom, that none of your adversaries shall be able to gainsay nor resist. This is one example of that, Stephen. And that's why they resorted to, locking up the prophets, killing them, stoning them, slandering them, bearing false witness, because they couldn't stop, they couldn't resist the truth. And that's why you see all these different stumbling blocks popping up everywhere, especially now, just like they did during the time of Jude. There was a great persecution against the church back then, and also against the gospel, the ministry back then. A lot of false witnesses. Some were a part of it. They left and started teaching other crap. Some just, didn't like what was going on, and their businesses were being, corrupted because of it, or they were losing money. They would, bring accusations against the apostles back then. You had the wicked Pharisees and Sadducees that were set up by the Romans, and they wanted him out the way. They wanted Yahushua out the way because he was messing up their money. Right. This is St. John 11:45, and this was when Yahushua raised up Lazarus from the grave after 4 days. This is St. John 11:45. Then many of the Jews which came to Mary and had seen the things which Yahushua did believed on him. See? So what does that mean? That means that they believe on him, they're going to become proselytes, and they're going to leave the Sanhedrin, which was the council of the higher up leaders back then, Pharisees, Sadducees, so on and so forth. But some of them went their ways to the Pharisees and told them what things Yahushua had done. Then gathered the chief priests and the Pharisees a council, and they always do that. We're going to get together, we're going to have this meeting, and we're going to get back to you. And said, what do we? For this man doeth many miracles. See? And that's why they said he did it in the name of Satan, but he was doing all kind of miracles. They knew it was of the Most High. So in essence, what did they do? They blasphemed the Holy Spirit. If we let him thus alone, all men will believe on him, and the Romans shall come and take away both our place and nation. See? So they knew that if they didn't do something, the Romans were going to take them out of that position, because the Romans put them up to that position. Now check this out. And one of them, named Caiaphas, being the high priest that same year, said unto them, you know nothing at all. So this is when Caiaphas was in his right mind. Because this Caiaphas later hired false witnesses to come against Yahushua. But back then he told them, nah, y'all don't know what the hell y'all talking about. It says, now, nor consider that it is expedient for us that one man should die for the people, and that the whole nation perish not. So he was in his right mind, but then he flip-flopped at the end. And this spake he not of himself, but being high priest that year, he prophesied that Yahushua should die for that nation, and not for that nation only, but that also he should gather together in one the children of the Most High that were scattered abroad, which were what? Israelites. All right? Let's go to that. St. John 11. St. John chapter 11. And what verse was that? 52. Let's look up that word, scattered abroad. Diascorpizo, which goes back to the word diaspora or diaspora. To disperse, that is generally to rout or separate, specifically to winnow, figuratively to squander, disperse, scatter abroad, stew, waste. You know, and then when you look it up, I'm not sure if the let me see, it got two words here. If you go back to the root words, it should take you back to the word diaspora, which means the ones that the Most High scattered, the Israelites that were scattered. Because that was a part of the curse that will come upon the Israelites, that they will be scattered throughout the four corners of the earth. And I'm going to leave you with that, you know, because the sun is getting like real intense right about now. The sun is intense, man. Inside joke. Deuteronomy 28:64, and the Lord Yahweh shall scatter thee among all people, from the one end of the earth even unto the other, and there thou shalt serve other gods, which neither thou nor thy fathers have known, even wood and stone. And that's pretty much what caused Jake to fall away from the truth, from following the Most High, even from their nationality. Because this devil vocab said, well, we're in the curses to say that they will lose their nationality. Well, what do you think that a proverb in the Bible and an astonishment means? If you're being called a proverb in the byword, obviously you're not being called by your name. You're being called out of your name. So if you're being called nigger, spook, spick, wetback, tonto, you're being called black, Puerto Rican, Cuban, you know, Haitian, so on and so forth. Those are bywords in proverbs. Those are not the name, our actual physical or our actual origins, you know, of nationality. So right within the curses, it says that we would become a proverb and a byword, which we would not be called by our names. You know? So come on, man. You got to get your game up, vocab. You're losing miserably, but you're only winning against those the Most High don't want. You're that stumbling block that the Lord set up so that those that he don't want can get caught there. And if they wake up, then you have other Israelite camps out there that teach a forward doctrine that they'll get caught up in if the Lord don't want them. But the Lord, the ones the Lord wants, he's going to guide them right to the right doctrine, right to the right truth, which would be Great Millstone and the associates of Great Millstone. And it's not bragging or boasting, it's just the truth, you know. It's just the God's honest truth. You know, it's not bragging or boasting, it's just telling the truth as it is, you know. So, I mean, I think I'll leave it there. You know, it's my first time out, you know, doing a lesson on you know, in the streets. It's been a minute, actually been years, I think, since I actually came out here. It's a beautiful day, so I decided, it's a Sabbath, so I decided to come out here and do a lesson, You know, so like I didn't read the comments because I can't really see the, you know, it's kind of bright out here, so I can barely see the screen on this right now. Yeah, I'm gonna close it there. If the Spirit allows, and I'll do another lesson. And with that, I pray that you brothers and few sisters have been edified. Till the next time I say shalom, you know, stay, you know, encouraged, keep on fighting. You know, pretty soon the Lord's gonna give us the upper hand. You know, I know it gets hard sometimes, but just hang on in there, you know. I promise it will pass. Inside joke, shalom.